Welcome to The Chaos Antidote, a leadership podcast hosted by Jason E. Neal, author of Accidentally Aligned: How Leaders Create Value in Chaos. Through these episodes, we will be exploring real-world problems and applying solutions that reduce your chaos and help you to become accidentally aligned. Hello, everyone. This is Jason E. Neal, author of the book Accidentally Aligned: How Leaders Create Value in Chaos. This book is available online. You can get this on Amazon. You can get this on Kindle, paperback, hardback, and now there's an Audible version. There will also be a couple of places you can catch up with me that I'll put in the comments. There's a couple of events that I'm doing. I'd love to have you at those events, so check the comments and you'll see some of that in there. So what are we talking about today? Today I want to talk about transactional lean, transactional improvement. And I get a lot of questions. I get a lot of feedback. I get a lot of thoughts as I've been doing this. And I try to grab those because I think, wow, well, if somebody took the time to ask that question or somebody took the time to think about that, then it's probably a good investment for me to put that on here, because where there's one question or there's one thought, there's usually many more that are behind it. So if we can grab some of those, that would be very helpful to people, I believe. So what's transactional lean? What's business process lean? Why is it different? Is it different? A lot of the pushback that I get. So let me give you a little background of where I come from. So I started my career with General Motors many years ago, and worked for General Motors doing engineering test. So I was testing, failure testing, automotive components, doing statistical analysis, working with manufacturing sites to rewrite their torque specs and their books and production, operationalize those ideas. And then went to Procter & Gamble, and then worked in research and development at Procter & Gamble, doing engineering research, working with customers. Then I started into General Electric, and I've been with General Electric for 20 years doing different things. But by and large, I worked in development assembly, so setting up test rigs, calculating data analysis, trying to figure out what the next product's defects might be. Went from there, went to testing, so testing engines and testing 60,000 horsepower land and marine turbines. This was for production, high rate, so you got to get them through really quick. You've got to get your test parameters in place, and then you have to do root cause corrective action very quickly, because it's you're the final stop between the assembly line and the customer. So very high stress position. Went there into sourcing. So in sourcing, I was working with our suppliers to deliver airfoils to our customers. So a lot of blades orders were coming in, very high volume. You might get an order for 20,000 on Thursday, and it might be due Monday. You might have a year of lead time required to produce the first unit. So very high stress job. Not quite at the end of the line like test, but pretty far downstream. So still a lot of pressure. Then from there, went to signing long-term service contracts. So with our customers, working and writing contracts that 30, 40 years in the future, how we're going to engage with our customers. Then from there, I took over the operations for our largest volume engine program that we have, and that was a very unique experience, also very far downstream. So we were actually shipping those direct from the site. So I was the last stop before the customer got those. Then quality manager for another large engine program. And that was interesting, because if you have quality issues, again, because they're going right out of there to the customer, you're the one that says stop. So I learned quite a bit there. Then from there, I started getting into taking more of a Six Sigma role, became a black belt, was a black belt for a plant, and then that's where formally I became into the lean, taking my experience and saying, I'm going to come out of this manufacturing, this quality, going to start working lean transformation, and became the global lean leader for my company, and started doing that, which was really, really cool. And then from there, I moved into the transactional realm. So I'm working in business transactions right now as we speak. And, you see a lot. You see a lot of differences, but you see a lot of similarities. And I will tell you, it's a picture that not a lot of people get to see in their life. And I'm really thankful that I've got to see it. I remember my sensei told me, if you can learn this, both sides of this, where you understand the operational side very well and you understand the transactional side very well, it gives you a very well-rounded picture of how to actually improve the system. And my sensei would always coach me to the systems level. Try not to think about the silo, try not to think about the individual component, but think about the system as a whole. And I do see this being a weak spot. I really do see this as being a weak spot. A lot of times it's easy when we're operationally minded, or we've worked in high rate assembly for our entire lives. It's very difficult when someone comes to us from engineering development, where it's very low rate production and there's a lot of holds and a lot of stops, and they're like, I need feedback, or I need help on how I would implement this here, and we just don't know. Well, I don't know because that's not the world I work in right now. We have a lot of data in high rate manufacturing assembly, and you don't have a lot of data, and the data that you do have has been changed through several changes in design that are coming from engineering. So we can't even compare apples to apples. We're seeing apples to oranges. I don't know how to work in that environment. You've got mixed model flow, and it becomes very confusing. And then when you take that, those are still both physical assets. I can touch them, I can feel them, I can perceive them with my senses. But I take that further and I say, now I'm going to go work with an abstract idea like human resources or engineering or sourcing, or something that there's not a physical thing that I can touch. It's these invisible processes that are happening. So where we lose a lot of people. And the ideas don't seem to be well understood. They don't seem to translate very well. So that's what I want to talk a little bit about today. We're going to talk about that transactional business side and what it's actually doing to your operational side. So most of the time when people talk about lean, they do stay on the shop floor. That's the visible component. That's where the machines are. But when you actually map the full value stream, and this is something that my sensei would teach me when I was learning this, is where see the value stream first where you can. And one of the first books I was given was called Learning to See. And we would begin to look and say, do we even have a visualization of our value stream? I'll find this often in transactional realm is a lot of times we don't even know who the customer is, which sounds bizarre because we're doing something and we're spending a great deal of money in it, but it's very common. When I when I engage with teams and when I get these questions from these podcasts, and how do I find out who my customer is? And like we're talking at what that shows me is there's a lot of fruit on that tree that we could go after. But when I see those same sites like that are functioning as a result of those transactional systems, they're making huge gains, which shows me that we understand at the operational level how this works. We do struggle a little bit more sometimes with the transactional realm. And where you do have folks that are good at transactional, they're not always good at operational. So you kind of miss this balance of I'm going to become a transactional business process transformation leader. I'm going to become an operational transformational leader, and that's great. But where you miss both, you're really leaving some stuff out there. I can tell you some of the biggest gains that I've ever made in my career were not on the line. They weren't on the physical line. They were in the transactional space. And by far, like not even close to the amount of gains there. But I want to start with a simple example of this. So in manufacturing, we use this term called inventory turns. So we would look at inventory turns and we would say, how often is a site flipping their inventory? And it's just a basic, it's a basic calculation. It's just math. It's cost of goods sold for the year. It's generally calculated on an annual basis, divided by the average inventory. So if you have a turn of 10, that means the inventory turns over roughly 10 times per year. So we would say their inventory turns are 10. When I look at automotive, the public financial numbers for the major OEMs like GM, Ford, Chrysler, Toyota, they land in the single digits to double digits. So let's just say, and if depending on what data source you pull, you're going to get different numbers. You can send me the emails and put it in the comment that this is, or this information is an error. It's not. What you'll find is there's a range, and it depends who reports it. But let's just use these numbers, and if you disagree with them, use your own numbers. You won't hurt my feelings. That's fine. But it's roughly 8 to 12 turns per year. Lean operational benchmarks and plant level targets are often higher. So many sources will put typical performance in the 10 to 18 range. I've seen these tables, totally fine. And then they'll claim that world class is somewhere from 20 to 25 plus. So that's kind of the numbers that we're dealing with. Those higher numbers usually reflect focused flow cells and very disciplined WIP and finished goods management rather than the full company inventory that includes everything. So it really depends on who you're talking to, what they're calculating, what they're looking at. But these are kind of the numbers that we're going to talk to today as we go through this conversation so that it makes sense. Now, you see those numbers, and I'm going to contrast those with aerospace. So aerospace and defense inventory turns commonly sit much lower, often in the 2 to 5 range. Why? Long cycle times. Certification holds, right? There's a lot of regulatory oversight. We're putting people in the air. It's a big deal. You're putting people in a little tube and you're sending them up 30, 40,000 feet at 500 miles an hour, and it's pretty important. So we want to make sure that that's right. That's a good thing. Also, there's a low volume, high mix production in a lot of aerospace, so you won't get that high rate production that you're seeing, like building a bunch of SUVs. They're the same. One might have air conditioning, one might not. One might have brown interior, one might have blue, one might be leather, one might not. But it's pretty much the same thing. Like you're modding some different things, but you're pretty similar. There's context or complex bills of materials that are driving a difference. A lot of times if you blow these, we call them a BOM, BOM, bill of material. If you blow these things up, it's staggering the amount of parts that goes into these. There's a lot of management, there's a lot of inventory, right? There's a lot of pieces that are required to make these things work correctly. You can't just copy automotive targets into something like aerospace and expect the same results. I share this because we're going to talk levels, right? So I made a statement at the beginning that it's a question, but it's a statement as well. But is it different to do lean and transactional production? Is it actually a different thing? And we're already seeing differences in the production, right? I wouldn't have the same targets for two industries. Now you run this across healthcare, you run this across agriculture, you run this across different things. Guess what you're going to find? Different numbers. So the goal isn't to take these ideas and apply them and say, yeah, everybody's going to have the same targets. No, that's certainly not true. We're dealing with different value streams, right? So you might have different part families. You're going to have different part families. You're going to have, even inside of your own businesses, you're going to have different part families. There's going to be differences in those value streams, and we have to consider those. But that doesn't mean it doesn't work. It means it's different, right? And that's really, really important. So here's where it gets interesting. Now we're going to switch over into the transactional realm. And we take that same metric into a completely different domain. Let's say hiring. Let us use this as an example, right? Imagine that an organization holds a pool of 20,000 applicants and they're going to hire 10 people that year. Now this is very common, very common. When I work with businesses and sometimes people will call and they'll say, hey, do you have a minute for a quick question? I'm like, sure, that'd be fine. And these numbers are common. And when I ask the question, why? Like, why do you hold that buffer? Why do you have that amount of buffer? Well, we want to make sure that we get the right people. But my question is always, why is it 20,000 to get 10? Like, why is that the number? Because we would never say, like, I want to have a part, I want to have a jet engine, or I want to have an automobile ready for a customer to buy. So I'm going to create 20,000 and just sit them there when there's no sales data that shows that we need that amount. There's no sales data that shows we're going to be able to sell that amount. We're just going to manage this invisible factory and just hope that good things happen, right? It's not a lean process. And that's why I say, like, the amount of impact that you will get from learning how to apply lean principles to transactional realm is staggering. It will absolutely blow your mind. These numbers are huge. And where we can start engaging with them, you will see a very quick return and a large return of efficiency into your business. So 20,000, right? I'm trying to hire 10. So we're going to see like 0.0005. So when I was talking about our aerospace being in the 2 to 5 range, automotive being in the 8 to 12 range, this is terrible. This is terrible. No one would accept this level of inventory turns. Nobody. And if you had this and you were running your business like this, you would be you'd either be getting coaching and hopefully investing in that, or you'd be preparing yourself to do something else, because this is not a good way to run a business. But yet most businesses, when they see these numbers, this is completely acceptable. Nobody blinks at this. They're like, yeah, it's great. In fact, it's prudent. People will say, this is a good move. Yeah, this is a good way to manage the business. We treat the candidate pipeline as a necessary buffer. Now, I'll share this because I share a lot of Shigeo Shingo's writings. I've read all of his books. I've read several of them more than once, all the ones that were translated into English. So I want to be clear about that. There's many more that were not. But I've read all those, and I've read several of them many times, and there's a lot of great insights in there. I do recommend, if you're looking for a book to learn more about this, that book series would be really good. But he says this in his books. He says, inventory is a necessary evil at times. And he said the problem is, I can agree that they're a necessary evil, but we spend more time defending the fact that they're necessary and less time defending the fact that they're evil. And where we learn to tolerate this and we're like, that's necessary, it's cool, that you're going to live there. That's if you say that it's necessary, that's fine. You're going to live there. You're never going to challenge that. If you start to look at this and say, wow, that's a lot of capacity that we're managing. We're actually managing invisible factories that are very expensive, and we're probably not being super respectful of our people, for one, having to keep these pools so high, but we're certainly not respecting the applicants. I mean, let's be real. If you're holding a applicant pool of 20,000 people, those people are invisible. They're just a number. That's not even a person at that point. There's no possible way we can understand what 20,000 people have to offer us or organization. So it's almost a lottery at that point, and that's not respectful. So we do want to continually be pushing against that and asking those questions. It is an evil, and fair. You want to say it's necessary evil? Fine, I'll meet you there. But necessary, fine. Evil, also true. So we want to attack them as both things. If you could cut that number by half, if you could go to 10,000, right? Wow. Because now you're going to be faster, for one. You're going to have less variation. You're going to have less opportunity for defects. And it's going to cause you to critically think and say, well, if we're going to cut it to 10,000, what 10,000 will we cut it to and why? What would be the criteria? And guess what? Those are the questions. Yeah, right? Those are the questions you should be asking. That leads us to the core difference between physical manufacturing and transactional work. On a manufacturing line, for example, if my tack time requires 1 unit every 8 hours, but then I have cycle stock, I have defects, process variation, and it's actually taking me 16 units to produce a good unit, I can, and right, necessary evil, often must, hold a physical inventory buffer of at least 1 extra piece, because I'm going to be twice my time, so I'm going to need an extra piece to meet customer demand. Very normal in manufacturing. Probably would go a little higher than that, especially if the run chart was showing that we had some high variation there, but that's debatable. Do what you want, but it's probably at least 1 if you're going to meet that customer demand. Inventory is expensive, and it hides problems, but it's a known lever. I can see it, I can count it, I can work to shrink it. It's physical. And I want to share some ideas, again, from Shigeo Shingo, right? One of the things that he said is, when he was talking and going and looking at plants, he had these 2 ideas. It was concrete and abstract ideas. So if I go to a plant, for example, and they have these parts and they're on a line, and I can pick them up, I can perceive them with my senses, I can smell them, I can touch them, I can hit them, and I can hear them, right? If I was in a weird mood, I could taste them. I wouldn't do that, but you could, right? They are able to be observed in our senses, and these are called concrete. He's like, those are concrete things. They're real. The machines, the people, the parts, right? But then there's this other aspect of it that he calls abstract. It's invisible. It's there, and a lot of times in North American manufacturing, we try to separate those two ideas. We'll say, well, that's concrete, so I can change that. I can change that because I can understand it. I can change that because I can perceive it with my senses. But because I can't understand this, and because I can't perceive this with my senses, I cannot change it. And that is false. And it's that piece that makes us lopsided, pushes us out of balance on the teeter-totter of business, and we live there. We're like, let's put all of our efforts into manufacturing and just forget transactional because we don't understand that. We're not very good at it, so we're just going to leave that alone. Be careful, because if your competition is, your days are short. I can just tell you that, because this is where most of the unlock is going to come from. Now, what he said was, and when he was walking us through this in his books, he's like, when I go to a manufacturing line and I see these things, I can touch them, I can perceive them in my senses. But then the operator will do something strange, like waiting. They'll stand there. What does waiting smell like? What does waiting taste like? What does waiting feel like? I can't perceive that thing in my senses, but it's happening. I can see it, right? I can see the operator, the concrete piece of it, but I can't actually see the waiting. But I can perceive the waiting. I can perceive that that is why the operator is stationary. And this is your transactional realm. It's all those things that when your manufacturing stops, it's the reasons why. Now, we call this the waste. We analyze this through waste analysis. But that's why this book, Learning to See, was one of my first books. My sensei wanted to tell me, I want to teach you how to see things you can't see. I want to teach you how to perceive things you can't perceive. I remember my first time when I walked out on we were building a plant. It's the first time I ever built a manufacturing plant from nothing. And we walked out there and it was all empty, and he said, what do you see? And I said, I see lights. I see a floor. And I'm kind of looking at him to see if I'm, hitting the right things. Is that the right answer? And he'd go on. And I'm like, I see some people, and, and he's like, yeah. And then I'm running out of things. And I said, what do you see? And he said, I see everything. And he said, it doesn't concern me that I see everything. What concerns me is that you don't. And he said, if I do my job well, by the time I'm done with you, you will see it too. And this is where we want to go. We want to get to that place to where we can see it. We can see the things that are invisible. We can see the things that are visible, and we can see the relation between them. This is systems. This is where we begin to see that systemic view and say, oh, wow, the invisible thing is causing the physical issue. Wow, that's huge. That's huge. People ask me, they're like, well, why do you talk about respect for people so much? Why do you talk about these people issues? This is why. Because a lot of times that invisible issue is actually causing your unlock or causing your lockdown system, that you're not getting what you want out of it. It's because we're not seeing that invisible thing. It's causing us a great deal of issues. And transactional issues or transactional processes, we can't always do the same thing. So for example, I have that process I was talking about. It takes 8 hours. I have issues, so I need 8 hours, but it's taking me 16 hours, so I need to buffer that. How would I do that in transactional? How would I do that in a business system? So in transactional process, this is very different. I can't pre-produce next month's customer complaints. I can't say, well, I'm going to buffer the customer complaints by 4 to keep my variation met. So while I can root cause that, I don't know what the customer is going to complain about. I'm not aware of it yet. So again, that's that systemic issue, right? Something's causing it. This is an output of something else, and the disconnect is causing me to have this high variation. So how do I buffer a receiving process for our high variation? It's very difficult. What if there's engineering change orders, and I what do I do? Are they coming? What rate are they coming in? I don't actually know, right? Call center, they can't stockpile future demand. Well, I need more people to call this month because we don't have enough to do. And wow, we're really loaded heavy this month, so I need to I need to do something differently. When the demand arrives, it arrives. It shows up. It's like, guess what? I'm here. So what are you going to do about it? And this is why a lot of our efforts aren't put here, because we just don't understand how to deal with that. It's very difficult. Excess capacity or large queues of work in process create waiting, rework, poor customer experience, and demotivation instead of protection. The same is true in hiring. A massive applicant inventory generates its own waste. What is that waste? Aging candidates, communication overhead, delayed decisions, and lost goodwill, right? We're not being super respectful of our people. So the tools have to adapt. Pull still works, but the signal is often a prioritized cue. Maybe it's a capacity gate or a clear visual trigger rather than physical Kanban card or some bin, right? You're not going to see this thing. You're not going to be able to touch it. It's invisible, but how do you make it visible? How do you make it to where people can see it and say, oh, I didn't realize, wow, you're holding 240 tickets in queue. How long have you been holding that many in queue? Is that normal? Maybe we should either increase capacity there. Maybe we should go upstream and begin to connect that value stream and try to solve that root cause. Or maybe we should apply Kaizen to make your ability to respond to that quicker. And in every situation, when I offer these recommendations, some people, oh, why would you ever do that? Well, do what you want, right? It's your plant. You're the expert. But I can tell you it's not always viable to go and do the most efficient thing. Sometimes you have to take steps towards that thing, and there are multiple options for doing that. This is in brownfield environment. You definitely will see this. I've lived this many times. Capacity management, demand leveling, standard work for knowledge tasks, and rapid problem solving become even more important than physical inventory reduction. Do you even have a standard? The three root causes for all problems, right? Type 0, standard does not exist. Type 1, standard is not followed. Type 2, standard is not capable, right? Can we even apply that? Can we even start there? And then I get these questions in brownfield environments where people will call and they'll be like, we have 300 processes and we don't have standards for any of them. Where do we start? I'm going to push it back to my video on Kingman's formula, right? And apply that to the value stream. And where do you need that efficiency? Do you even have a view of your value stream? Can you tell where your constraints are? Can you tell where your throughput issues are? Right? Is your goal to get throughput? Is your goal to reduce order to cash cycle? What's your next step? Of course, that's your end goal, but like, what's your next step? Do you need an inventory reduction so you can free up cash so that you can invest in future development, so that you can invest in things that are needed to create capacity or to reduce your order to cash cycle? What's your next short-term play, right? And what's it moving towards? That's where that value stream aimed at your customer will tell you. The customer needs us to do this, so we're going to have to make some decisions. Your decisions are going to be different than other people. And this makes people very uncomfortable. A lot of times I'll get calls and they'll say, well, what should we do? And I'm like, it depends, right? It depends, because without understanding your problem, I cannot help you find a solution. And a lot of times we'll look at businesses, and I see this at the detriment of many businesses. They'll say, well, we got an issue. We'll go benchmark somebody that's doing this really well. Well, that's great. Go do that. That's wonderful. But if you go benchmark that and drop that in as your solution, and they're solving a problem, and the problem is different than the problem you're solving, you will not solve your problem. You'll actually create a new one. And it's very important that as we do this problem solving, you say, what is the problem that I'm trying to solve? And then does the solution that I'm proposing match that problem? That's where you're going to get your gold right there. Doesn't matter what other people are doing. And when I share this, I get a lot of pushback. People are like, well, there has to be one system that works everywhere. That's fair. The tools and the behaviors are the system that works everywhere. They don't always work in the same order. They don't always work in the same application. There are times that you have to move them, right? The tools and the behaviors themselves are a system. So if I start running faster, my heart rate will increase, my lungs will begin bringing air in faster, but I can also begin breathing slower, which will lower my heart rate even if I'm running. And it's that systemic balance that we begin operating at that systemic level and saying, I understand the levers that make this happen. That's where you want to get. That's that learning machine that when I coach teams and when I coach businesses, you want to build. You want to build a learning machine, because a learning machine will stay with you when your sensei or your consultant leaves. If you have built a machine that is capable of learning, they will continue learning. If you have built a machine that is capable of receiving inputs and responding with their brains turned off, that's going to be expensive for you, because you're always going to be calling the consultant back. You're always going to be calling and saying, hey, I'll give you another $50,000 if you come in here and help me with this. Well, a good teacher will teach, right? You should be able to learn and understand not just the answer, but the process for getting there. And that's what I try to instill in these podcasts, because that's what my sensei did for me. So here's the key insight that I've seen repeatedly. When organizations finally confront their transactional issues with the same rigor that they apply on the line, the improvements are frequently larger, sometimes dramatically larger. Why? Because so much of the total lead time and so many of the upstream problems that disrupt the line actually originate in the transactional processes. What are they? Slow approvals, incomplete information, long hiring cycles. What does it do? Guess what? It leaves cells understaffed. Change control processes that inject variability. These are not side issues. They're often the main issues. You think about this. Somebody needs an employee. Let's say an engineer quits, or they get a promotion, or they go to another job and they leave, or a production associate leaves. The line doesn't stop. I've been in this business a long time. We don't stop anything for anything. That work is absorbed by who? By those around them. So what happens? They're not staffed for that. They're not numerically built for that, right? Especially if we're doing lean and we have standard work, right? We have these work sequences. Now we may go switch to a standard work that goes from a 3 to a 2, but that's fine. You are increasing the burden upon those people. And the longer that you wait to get the right person to come back in, that capacity strain is felt by those people that are carrying it. So again, it lands on what? Respect for people. So why do you talk about this so much, Jason? That's such a basic idea. No, it's not. It's not a basic idea. And we don't understand the idea. That's why I talk about it so much, because we don't bat an eye on doing that. Well, Carla's a really good worker, and she always works 80 hours a week, and we can rely on her. So let's just drop this on Carla because she's picked up the last 7 that we've dropped. Carla's looking for another job. You just don't know it yet. And now you're not down just 1, but you're going to be down 2. And guess what? That second one, that's your high performer, right? So don't bypass these as elementary issues. You can. A lot of people do. A lot of big companies do. And Toyota calls this big company disease, right? We have so much money. We have so much inventory. We have so much power. We have these economic advantages, right? We're too big to fail. So we'll get through it. Yeah, you might. You might not. These are things that are very important to consider. Transactional lean is not about doing 5S on desks or moving the printer closer. This is what I usually see when I go to sites. Like, hey, yeah, we 5S'd our desks. We cleaned up the office. We moved the printer closer. I'm walking 5 feet to the printer instead of 10. Now that the guy or the girl across the office we switched that. Now they're walking twice as far, but that's cool. It was a lean event, and I can find my stapler now when I need it. It's a good start. It's a good start because you're at least using the tools, but you're leaving a lot on the table. A lot on the table. You want to start challenging your systems to give the same answers that you would expect from manufacturing. Why is it taking this long? Why do we hold these inventories? What does your inventory even look like? How do you define inventory? How do you define what safety looks like? It's not going to be 10 fingers, 10 toes in transactional, but it might be something like psychological safety, right? Start there. What's quality look like? What's delivery? What's cost look like, right? How do we define these things? How do we define these metrics, and how do we measure them? How do we improve towards them? The organizations that treat the office, the hiring process, and the approval chains and the service queues with the same seriousness that they treat the production line are going to unlock that pure shop floor efforts never reach. You will get a massive unlock, the likes of which you've never seen. This is the conversation that I want us to keep having. It's this systemic conversation. It's seeing the entire system. And a lot of times when I say the word system, people think I'm talking about the manufacturing system. I am, but I'm talking about this invisible transactional business process that relates to it. It's not, if you're running them as 2 separate businesses, you're leaving a lot on the table. But what's our goal? Our goal is to make tomorrow better than today. I'm Jason E. Neal. This is my podcast. Follow me on LinkedIn. If this is helpful, click like, click subscribe. Join me at the events I have coming up. I'd love to have you there. And let's make tomorrow better than today. Thank you.